Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're just about to begin the AGM, just waiting for our Treasurer, Diane, to come back to tell us more about the money in the organisation. She's just popped out for the moment.
Done a runner with it.
She hasn't done a...
She's done a runner, as you know. Okay, great. Brilliant. But welcome. Thanks for making the effort to come to the AGM from all around the four nations. I'm Alan Moncrief, your president. The agenda items and papers were made available online for your access, so if you can make some access now via your laptops or phones, you can see those extra items there. And there were 9 items on the agenda, including this introduction. So I'll just crack on, and where Diana comes in, we can invite her to sit down and take her spot later on the agenda. So I'll go on to point 2 now, the declarations of conflicts of interests. Any to note from anybody in that respect? No? These should have been declared to the Secretariat anyway. So we'll open this AGM, first of all, with a BERA governance review and the membership vote, which Nick
I think
and
we
Vivian
can say a few words of introduction and then...
Yeah.
Well, welcome. I'm Vivian Bournefield, the past president of BERA. It was during my time as president that some big changes were happening within BERA, particularly in terms of becoming our own employer, and we now employ a professional office staff, which makes a lot of the things that we do possible. And we were moving to have our own premises. The growth in membership and taking on these extra responsibilities meant that we needed to look carefully at governance within BERA, and maybe some of our perfectly good but very informal and perhaps not necessarily robust or resilient enough to deal with some of the challenges we were beginning to face might need a refresh and a review. So we decided that first thing we would do was invite an external consultant to actually look at our governance systems and to reflect on how they compared with other organisations and the extent to which they were fit for purpose and would be feasible going forward with these new demands that would be made on us. So we had an external review, which we then discussed extensively within Council and began to look at how we might move forward in the light of some of those suggestions. We also decided that we would draw upon the expertise of previous presidents and people who'd been closely involved in BERA to actually form a small working party to kind of look at the things that Council were struggling to decide what the best way forward was, to look at the workings of BERA and the recommendations. And out of that came the outcomes of that stage in the review of governance. And I don't know if, Nick, you want to say a bit more?
Yeah, I will follow on, and I'm conscious that there are people in the room who were part of the last review of governance, and some of the issues that came up then have been recurring this time. But I suppose one of the things that we were keen to do is be evolutionary, not revolutionary, because there's a lot that works well, and this is as much about preparing us for the future as throwing up in the air what is working now. So we've been relatively cautious with what we are doing, and as you will see in a minute, there are 3 particular changes in front of you now. But I suppose the first thing to summarise again, and I mentioned it earlier, things that have been implemented already that don't require constitutional amendments are the creation of the 4 nations representatives on council, which we implemented during the course of this year, and we now have those people in place. And again, those roles are evolving, but we now have dedicated briefs to represent BERA in the 4 nations of the UK, but also represent the 4 nations of the UK into BERA Council explicitly. We've always tried to have representation from across the 4 nations, but we've now developed a specific remit to that. We've also significantly enhanced the training and support we provide for trustees taking into account the additional legal responsibilities and governance responsibilities that they have. And actually at the council meeting this morning we were discussing that further in terms of other areas that council would like further training and support on. So we've enhanced that package. We brought in a couple of years ago a sort of a rigorous application process for trustee and leadership roles, so that we can try and make sure that across the set of trustees we have different skills and different interests represented in a broad sense to try and reflect the membership but also the responsibilities of governance. And also we have been introducing sort of exit surveys and we're wanted interviews of trustees, picking up on learning about how the trustee experience has worked for people to improve our best practice. So this has all been about trying to, I suppose, bring us into line with standard charity practice and adopt good things that work elsewhere. So the three things that are tabled today for member approval are the three recommendations from council. One is to change the governance year so that it becomes the calendar year, which aligns with both the membership year and the financial year. This may seem a bit of a semantic point, but it's actually more about generating interest in elections and voting, because one of the things this will enable us to do is run the election period for any council or officer positions during conference, and we hope that might be a way of stimulating interest in engagement and increasing voter turnout, which has been a constant challenge, not just for us, I should say, but for many such organisations. But that's one of the primary drivers for that, is we felt this was a better way to generate engagement in terms of that. So that's the first change that is proposed. The second change, and probably a more significant change, is creating a new trustee board that certainly initially is effectively a subset of the existing council, which will remain, but the legal and financial and governance responsibilities will move to a smaller group. Effectively at the moment what BERA has is it has a leadership committee that was general purposes committee for those that might have served on it in the past, most of which are sitting up here, the committee chairs and other office holders who meet in between the council meetings and the council. And I think the feeling very much within BERA but also from external advice was that group was too small to be making some of the key decisions, but the council as it is at the moment is quite a large group to be able to have some of the discussions that you need to have in terms of governance side of things. But we didn't want to lose the representativeness that having a large council gives in terms of representing different interests, different points of view, different perspectives from across the membership in terms of determining BERA's priorities. But that actually, at the moment, a lot of council meetings are taken up with the government side of things rather than the blue sky thinking and the discussing key priorities in educational research, and that therefore this was to free up council's time to do that. There were, I think, quite extensive debates about whether they should be two completely separate bodies or not, and the feeling that, it was more than a consensus, it was an agreed position, was that creating two bodies is likely to set up conflict. So actually having a trustee board that is appointed by council and effectively a subset of council should mitigate against there being too many disputes and too many different voices, and also people having to double up and go to two different meetings. So that's the second change and the reasons before it. And then the other question that elicited quite a lot of discussion, and not necessarily agreement, but probably a consensus, is the role of the president. And there was debate about whether the role of the president as, I suppose, an external representative of BERA should be or could be separate from the chair of the trustee board. And I think this oscillated various ways in the discussions that we had. But we came down on the view that at the moment, that was probably one change too far to make at this point in time. So we should keep it as one and the same and then review that as time goes on. I think there are concerns about the workload for that individual, and I'm conscious that there two sitting either side of me here and several others in the room that have occupied that role and know what's involved in that, and that's one of the things that was factored into that. However, the recommendation that is before you today is that the incoming president, so the vice president, will be elected 2 years prior to taking up the office rather than 1, so have a longer lead-in time so that they can really hit the ground running with things like the presidential seminar series, other activities and other plans, and have that longer induction, and that the past president role that Vivian now occupies would not be a trustee, but will probably stay on council to offer advice, but actually staying on as a trustee is probably not as valuable as having the next president learning the ropes on the board there. So the third change in front of you today is changing the term of office for the vice president in that sense. So they're the three changes we are recommending, and I think council are recommending to the membership to approve today. And that will change the articles of association, and you will see in the papers we've said what they will look like. What we have committed to doing is, once they've been agreed in principle, we will be getting some legal advice to make sure that everything is written correctly in the way it goes. So we've drafted them, but they're subject to the final bit of legal advice, subject to approval.
And the review?
Yeah, and also council agreed this morning that we would review these changes in 5 years, which we felt was a decent period for to become embedded, see how they worked out, a full term of office for the new office holders in that system, and there would be a formal review process in 5 years as to whether they'd worked, whether we might need to go backwards, or whether there's actually further things we might need to do in that period of time.
So we have a list for people to see, or how are we going to get them to vote?
We can take some questions first, and there may be questions, comments, thoughts on it. So
I think there's something just over here.
Okay, thanks. 1 and 3, I don't have a problem with. 2, I'm just a little bit worried about the relationship between trustees and council. So, some of you know I'm Executive Officer of Philosophy Education Society. We did the same thing in terms of reducing our trustees a few years ago. We're now changing to be incorporated, and we just had the solicitor's advice on the fact that our entire exec is a de facto trustee. It doesn't matter what our constitution says, because they still have input into the decision-making powers of the charity. So when I'm looking at this in terms of things like financial oversight, it's the kind of thing the solicitors have raised as an issue, which is we can't be a body within a body, because if council is essentially making the main decisions, it is a de facto trustee, and the law would treat council as trustees, is our solicitor's advice on that, which is why we, from January, will be a different kind of structured organisation. So my worries in the first case is that actually whether or not you're setting yourself, or council is setting itself up to be a de facto trustee anyway. And related to that, I think, is the question about member voice, about how that plays in, because a lot of this depends upon council still being essentially that member voice organisation, which is how member influence the kind of decisions of the charity. And separating out council as having no power and being purely, at best, a morally advisory council to actually the decision-making body of trustees seems to me to be problematic in terms of whether or not there's still sufficient member voice in relation to the trustees, because they essentially can just ignore council should this go through. So the first point is the legal question, which is whether or not there is sufficient difference between the two. And if there isn't, how does that play out in terms of member voice in relation to council and the trustees going forward? Is that clear? Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll take the legal situation first, and I'll invite if there's any other comments on the wider one, because it's probably not. I'm probably not best placed to say that. But in terms of the legal, yeah, I mean, we've got distinct remits for the trustee board and the council that separate out what that would be, and that's why we would get the legal advice at the next stage to clarify that. But the idea was they would be sufficiently different in terms of their remits and job descriptions to make that distinction clear as to who has the legal responsibilities as trustees and who is the council. But I don't know whether others want to offer perspectives on the...
Yeah, I mean, I think we were very, very concerned and mindful that membership, the voice of the members was the key thing in all of this. And so the key role of council is actually to consult with, to be representative of, and to work very closely with members. So we saw the setting up of the trustees as purely dealing with the governance side of things, and obviously how that relates to members and to council is very important and a very delicate and dynamic relationship. So we were hoping that what we are putting to you today would actually preserve that. So we didn't want two separate and distinct bodies. That was the last thing we wanted. And we wanted council to still be the mechanism or the channel or the way in which BERA works very, very closely with members and actually listens to members. And in a way, we're hoping that this will actually promote greater democracy within BERA rather than the opposite, because the structures as they exist at the moment, we're not succeeding always in having the active participation in some of the aspects of BERA. So we've got very active members in terms of our publications and submitting to publications and conference, but when it comes to elected positions, that's not working out as well as we'd hope. And so some of these changes are actually to improve, we hope, the representation of members. I think it is important that we keep this under review, but our feeling was after this period of discussion and debate that what we're proposing will do what you're saying is important, because we perfectly agree, and I think probably some of the debate and discussion was exactly around the point that you're raising. So we do need to keep an eye on this, we do need to be mindful of it, but the existing structures actually were not necessarily promoting the kinds of democracy and member voice that you are advocating for.
I'm just wondering if you've consulted at all with ERA, which has a very different kind of constitution, and what it tries to do with its council is actually offer leadership, not representation. Its president, unlike Marlon and also me when I was president, is a kind of secretary to the council. And plays a different kind of role. And I just wonder if that might be a useful point of comparison. I'm not clear from what you're saying, Nick. Is the proposal here to be agreed, or are you going to take into account what the issues that Richard has just raised? So are we signing off on this at the moment? Because I think the issues he's raised are quite serious, potentially. And I'm just, I know exactly what Viv's talking about in terms of trying to get people onto council with a sort of leadership role in mind and not a self-interest role in mind, and there to sort of facilitate the work of the learned society. But I'm just wondering, I can see why you've arrived at this particular point, but I'm just wondering if it's the right place.
I just take the point about part of the remit of the consultant we got was to look at other research bodies, which included ERA and WERA and other learning societies in the UK, to look at their models. I think it's fair to say everyone has a slightly different model on it. I think the one thing that was very clear is that in a UK context, 21 trustees was very, very large and not recommended good practice. So the choice really became what's the best way to reduce the number of trustees while retaining that member voice and representation. And that's what the process has gone through. They are here for approval today because we've gone through a lot of different processes over the past 18 months, 2 years, in terms of doing it, in terms of getting that external advice on that. And we appreciate that. I mean, even on council, there were differences of emphasis and differences of view, but this was the consensus that council arrived at in those deliberations, having been party to all the reports and all the consultations in terms of other organisations. Is there anyone who wants to add to that?
Well, the only thing I would perhaps add to it is, to say what you said at the beginning, Nick, was not to throw the bathwater out with the baby, whatever the expression is, because we do have very good committees that do our business. So we were thinking of the best possible fit for the organisation, but to also respond to what is good practice in the sector. And as Nick has said, 21 trustees was clearly not the best way to be proceeding. As a big learned society, we employ our own staff. That element of our work has become much more important in recent years. So we were trying to balance what would work that didn't, maybe if we started from scratch, we would not arrive with the proposal we're putting on the table today. But we are trying to do the best with what we have, knowing that lots of what we do works really well. So I guess I would add that.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say we're not proposing any changes to the existing committee structure within this, and the committees are a mixture of trustees or council members, but also the majority of them tend to be ordinary members elected from the broader membership. So Conference and Events Committee, Engagement Committee, Finance and Operations Committee and Publications Committee have a broad range of members who aren't currently trustees, but do provide that member voice on those committees. And one of the things, as Ross said, that we were very keen to do is not dilute the effectiveness of those committees. And some of the things that were proposed from the external consultant were ripping it up and starting again, and I think we all felt that wasn't the best way of doing it. So it was about preserving what worked while trying to address the issues that clearly needed addressing.
Just pick up.
I mean, the microphone happens to be at this table, so I thought I might as well take advantage of it. I've heard the recommendation from a number of different places in relation to a number of different organisations about how small is beautiful when it comes to having a board of trustees, and I entirely understand the strength of that argument. And in a way, the proposal that you keep a large body to ensure member representation, which is always the argument against becoming smaller, and then create a smaller body to do the trustee work, looks initially like a very neat solution. My concern, I'll come to the particular formula in just a second, was that once you've done that, you do then have to speak very clearly about the relationship between those two bodies. At the end of the day, we've had a legal point raised, which I'm not competent to make any judgment about. You do have to decide which of those two bodies is the more important, which will have the final say in something. Now, the situation that I was thinking of was one which I've often come across in my time of involvement with BERA, is that there's been concern that the president, whoever it might be, has been unable to speak loudly, clearly and quickly on issues of the day because the president has felt unable to feel authorised because they don't quite know how to communicate to the membership as a whole to make sure that what they're saying truly represents BERA. Now, you're never going to have everybody in BERA agreeing on anything. We can all agree on that, I hope. But it is clearly important that the president is going to make those statements about government pronouncements, reports, committees and so on, that they do have the authority of knowing that they're speaking on behalf of the organisation. So my question was, which of these two bodies might the president turn to in that sort of situation? Now, the engagement with the membership points them very clearly at the new form council, but the interest in the long-term viability, the regulatory aspect of the board of trustees suggests very strongly that that's the body that they should turn to. And if they have to turn to both, then you're making that situation clearly worse, and Bureau presidents will never be able to respond to anything in a timely manner ever again. So, I mean, it's a similar, I came at it in a very different way, but it's a similar question about what ultimately will be the relationship between the two. I'm beginning to get a little bit of a sense that you're talking about governance in some kind of vacuums, about structures, rather than about actual decisions about real things. And the Board of Trustees will have to make real decisions about real things, and the council will be talking about those same things as well. So my feeling increasingly is we need to know more about your thoughts about how those two bodies are going to ultimately deal with each other.
Respond as a former president.
Yeah, I mean, this was very much debated within our deliberations exactly where the President would sit and whether there would be a separate chair of trustees and President. And that's why we think that we should adopt this evolutionary approach, and that the President currently under this proposal would actually be the chair of the Board of Trustees and would still continue with their role on council as it stands at the moment. So I do think that some of these things are clearly very complex and thorny issues. I think the imperative from our point of view when we started this process was the way that the structures were working at the moment would not actually guarantee the robustness of BERA going forward. Once we'd become our own employer and once we were actually taking premises and being responsible for those, that we needed to look carefully at what the responsibilities of the trustees would be and whether it was possible to have that with such a large group of trustees, the whole of council being essentially the trustees of BERA. So there were two, I think, driving forces behind it. One was a concern that we needed to have a more active democratic process happening within BERA, and that wasn't necessarily happening under the old structure, and also a sense that we actually had to look at the responsibilities of actually employing our own staff and taking on contracts for premises, and that gave quite a lot of focus then on actually how did we deal with these governance issues. And I take your point exactly, you know, trying to separate out governance from strategic direction from representation. These things are not in silos, they do overlap considerably. And what we're proposing is this kind of gradual move, trying to sort of resolve some of the issues that we feel need attention under the current structures, which we don't think are actually going to be necessarily resilient enough to deal with any issues or problems that may arise. And we do need to improve the flow, the pipeline, if you like, of people willing and able to take up leadership positions within BERA, because at the moment that isn't something which is happening in quite the way that we would hope.
Okay, so, I mean, it is really about, this split is really about division of focus and division of labour in terms of operational and academic in that respect. And we must also remember that with the Four Nations representations that we're able to create as part of this, that helps with voice and representation across the Four Nations as well. And those particular members will sit on both bodies in that respect. So I think it's for us to come to some kind of decision about where we're going with this, really. And so we need to make a vote on this in that respect. So one way to do that is to sort of ask you to raise your hands whether you're prepared to sort of have confidence in our committee to take this forwards or not. So if you want to raise your hands to
should we do one at a time?
One at a time, yeah, one at a to which one should we go with
so
first?
Just change of governance, yeah.
Change of governance.
Can I just clarify, because clarify, Jameson, there's no text here for constitutional change. So are we voting to constitutional change, or are we voting that council is given authority to take forward to come up with wording for constitutional change? Because obviously that changes where...
There is on the paper that's on the website, there's the appendix is the amended articles.
Okay.
It is there.
So that's the amendment, because normally I would expect in the appendix to say what needs to be replaced at which point. At the moment, that level of specificity isn't there. Actually, in the article I've been downloading, which is that it says in the appendix, it says amended articles. It doesn't give me a sense of what article is being amended where, what change in text.
It says points 20 to 26 are the Articles of Association. That's the only...
When I, in the government
in the bit above in the main paper it says these are points 20 to 26 of the articles with a link to the current articles. And so that's the proposed changes to it.
Okay, so one at a time then, is that resolved? Yeah, one at a time, then we'll go through what we're going to make a decision on. Which one first? The governance review?
Governance year.
Yep. And this is for members only to vote as well on this. So if you're in favour of our changes, please can you raise your
Governance
hand?
year. One at a time.
For the governance review.
Governance year. Change of the governance
Change
year.
of governance.
Yeah. This is changing the governance year.
Changing the
We're doing one
governance
at a time.
year. Changing the
We're doing
governance
them one at a
year.
time.
So to end at the 31st. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. We get to vote as well.
I think we've got proxy votes as well.
Okay, that seems to be in favour of change of governance year.
We're just doing a quick ticker.
Oh, I didn't see that going
Yeah,
around actually.
so let's just doing that.
Quick ticker. Change of governance year.
I've got some proxies.
That's a new way of doing it.
Which tables have we done? It's the controversial one. So do you want to do the role of the president next?
I think we're just finishing the counts. Just finishing the counts here.
I think we've done the count. And we've got the proxy votes as well. ID, which we need to add to it. But
Yep.
yeah. I think, is there anyone against that? Should we just ask, is there anyone against?
Anybody against the change of the governance year? Put your hands up so we can see. Okay, it's
Yeah.
inclusive.
Should we do the other, hopefully non-controversial one, which is about the term of office for the president first, because it might be more straightforward.
Yeah. So the term of office for the
So
president.
that's changing the term of office for the president, so that the president would come in 2 years beforehand, rather than just one.
2 years for the vice president, 2 years for the president, and past president, someone like me would not continue as a trustee.
Okay, if you're in favour of that change, raise your hands, please. Clickers are coming around. Once you're clicked, you can put your hand up.
Yeah. We foresaw controversy.
Okay. Yep, we've been counted.
Are there anyone opposed to that?
Yep. Anybody opposed to that particular change? Raise your hands, please. No? Okay. And the third vote in relation to changing the structure of governance.
Yeah.
If you are...
So this is creating the new trustee board as a subset of council.
If you're in favour of that, raise your hands, please.
All the proxies are in favour as well. But I need to check out exactly how many we've got. Because we've got some from those that couldn't make it today. Tanya, Jerry, Chantal, Yue, Sinwan.
Let's just finish this count.
We got everybody. Yeah. Have you got the ones at the front as well, yeah? And
Oh, don't miss out, guys.
5 up here.
Heidi's been counting us anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Those opposed.
All those opposed, raise your hands, please. All those opposed. We can count You, thank you.
Two. Won't take us. Yes.
Just, no, just over here.
Three. Okay.
Four.
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 Okay. I think they're all carried.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we can move on the agenda to the next.
I think they're all carried.
Yep, they're all carried. So all three are carried through.
Subject to review.
Subject to review.
No, in 5 years.
In 5 years. Not
I
tomorrow.
might say that. Okay, let's go to the next point of the AGM, which is the Bearer Race Equity Policy. And this is on the agenda for our commitment to transparency and sharing our lead in action and our action plans. Again, this is part of this. This has been disseminated on the website for this particular AGM as well. I want to thank before we talk more about it, I want to thank Diane Warner, Saffron Powell, Paul Miller, Rachel Robinson, and Penny Ravisher, our Bureau members, for helping us to structure this. If you have had the chance to look at this particular policy, or if you're looking at it now, you'll see that it's very in-depth in terms of ensuring that we are using thoughtful and considered language of inclusion to ensure that BERA is a welcoming society for all people to flourish in that respect. And we affirm our commitment to equitable treatment of all people through this particular policy. Are there any further questions or any questions or comments on this particular policy that anybody would like to make? Yes, please.
Just one very small point this time. It looks as if excellent progress is being made, all of the indicators going in the right direction. The one reference point I couldn't see in the paper was any discussion about the ethnic mix of the profession as a whole, and whether BERA is moving to be more in line or not keeping up with whatever changes might be happening there. And that would be useful to know.
So in terms of the count, in terms of the membership count, in terms of
yes, I mean, the references are all to the proportion of people from different groups that are on different parts of our system, and they're all moving very much in the right direction. So that, I mean, that's excellent stuff. But I didn't see any reference to the change in the ethnic mix of the profession of educational researchers, which I'm guessing has been quite significant over the last decade.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm guessing that it probably has been. And that, therefore, it would be useful to know whether BERA is lagging behind, moving ahead of, keeping up with those changes in the profession as a whole.
Yeah, I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, I'm afraid, but we did use the report we commissioned as part of the State of the Discipline project that looked at precisely those figures across the discipline as a whole, in terms of across all EDI issues when we were looking at our own targets when we first did the policy 3 years ago. I can't remember the figures there. What that report did, because we only did it 4 years ago, or whatever, commissioned it 4 years ago, we haven't necessarily got tracking information on what it was previously, and we haven't updated it. So we can't look at trends in that wider data at the moment. Although what I would say on that is through the Academy of Social Sciences, we have finally got better access to HESA data, which is what gives all of that. And HESA have been notoriously reluctant to release that data to anybody to look at, but we have got agreement through the Academy to do that. Yeah. So now that data should be more publicly available, that should be easier to do. And we also, as part of the State of Discipline project, we recommitted to run the survey of educational researchers that we did 3 years ago in due course to get tracking information on that. That won't necessarily give us as robust data as the HESA data on that, but we have got better access to the HESA data to be able to benchmark that in due course as well.
Okay. Okay. Any other further comments? No? Okay, thanks very much. Let's go to the next point, point 5, the BERA Annual Activity 2024. Some slides.
Yeah, I will be in charge of slides unless people want me to pass the clicker down as we go through. What I would say is the full reports from each of the committee chairs and myself are in on the website with the papers for this meeting, but what I think we're each going to do now is just run through very briefly some key elements of that and make a few acknowledgements as we do that as well. So, Vivian, you are up first.
Okay.
We can't see
to crane my neck. Yeah, so we're in this rather unusual situation which, following the vote that we've just had, won't happen in the future, where you've got actually a president report from me, because I was president during some of this period and am now past president. So the highlights are there, really. So this is going to be a two-handed president report, because Marlon's going to take over in a minute. The main things that I wanted to pull out there was one of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that we had some continuity. So my predecessor, Dominic Wise, who commissioned the and led on the state of the discipline, one of the things that came out of that, as well as the issues around EDI, was also the issues around funding for educational research. So I took up the baton, if you like, and launched the expert panel on funding for educational research, which you heard from earlier this afternoon, and that's ongoing, and I'm continuing to be involved in that project as ex officio. And also one of the things I wanted to do during my time, as well as promoting Four Nations involvement, and we've seen that we've now got Four Nation representation embedded within the structures of BERA. It was always there as an important aspect of our work, but perhaps wasn't made explicit and certainly wasn't embedded into the structures that we have, so that's now happening. And the other thing I wanted to do was promote partnership and make sure that as BERA we were well connected, and rather than trying to necessarily replicate things that were happening, we built partnerships. And so it was very heartening to see the partnership where we were approached by the Consumer Trust and to work with them in partnership. So we've been reaching out, being proactive, but it's quite nice to have a partnership which came from people wanting to partner with us. So I'm very pleased about that as well. And hopefully this will be a future development for BERA as we move forward. And it's up to me to thank the people who were on BERA Council and committee members whose terms have ended this year. And you'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to go through them one by one. You've got their names and pictures there. But, BERA is its members. And as we were discussing earlier, it's absolutely vital that we have an active membership who fully participate in things that we do. And we can't function without them. So thank you to those people.
And I think that's over to me now. So reporting for the Conference and Events Committee, and I guess our major event this year was our conference, which was held in Manchester in conjunction with the WERA Focal Symposium, and it was our largest conference ever at 1,995 delegates, which was, and I'd like to, she'll be hiding just now, but I will pay tribute to Marie Moore and her team once again, because that was a huge undertaking. We also reinstated the pre-conference events. 4 days was not enough. People wanted to come a fifth, and we had 250 delegates attending the pre-conference events. 6 keynote presentations, because obviously WERA had 3, we had 3, and over 750 papers. And while I'm mentioning this, and this is the largest conference that I think we will run for a very long time as well, I see Felicity and I see Dominic in the audience, and I'd just like to pay tribute to both of them and the work that they did. They're my predecessors in the role as CEC chair, and I just want to pay tribute to them and the work that they did, because we would not have been able to have run that big conference if they hadn't done that enormous amount of work before I came into post. BERA is not just the conference. We also, that's the second year we've run an ECR conference, and this year we had more than 100 delegates, which is double last year. Who knows what happens this year? I don't think we can take many more than 100. We also run a full programme through the year, and we have a new member of staff, Garvin, who looks after that. We have run 48 online events this year, as well as 4 in-person events. That includes 1,500 registrations and 800 attendees at these events. So we are very busy through the year. And again, beyond Marie and her team, I just want to thank the office, because if we didn't have that professional office team, we would not be able to run a year-round set of events like this, which I think is it's a big membership offering that we give. Marlon has hit the ground running, and he has already begun the BERA Presidential Seminar Series on anti-racism in education. So the first of the seminars has taken place in Edinburgh, and we look forward to events in the other 3 nations in 2025. SERA, the Scottish Educational Research Association, are also having a birthday this year, and so we ran a joint event in May with them. And finally...
Sorry, I was going...
That's okay.
No. Going too quickly.
No, on you go. I was waiting for it to go. Yes. Abstract submission is already open for BERA Annual Conference 2025, and we have some abstracts in. So that's okay. And we have video.
So we're here in Manchester for BERA's 50th anniversary conference, and it is really exciting. There are people from all over the world. There are people who are at all stages of their careers from all different areas of educational research, and it is so exciting to be in a city that is just very vibrant and fun.
And there's a real buzz about the place, discussions about education all around the world, and I think it's the 50th anniversary. It shows all the work that BERA has done coming together, and meaning that people go back to their academic workplaces or to schools or colleges or wherever, full of enthusiasm to take forward their research.
I think it's the networking and also great presentation. I heard some wonderful keynote speech this morning.
I have just literally attended the first SIG meeting, special interest group meeting I've attended for a number of years, and it was fabulous. I just met lots of emerging scholars and some experienced scholars. And that's what BERA is all about.
My favourite thing about this year's conference is welcoming in Lala Moncrief as our first ever black president. And this is a historical moment, so that's this year.
I see BERA, for example, to be a platform that provide resources, opportunity for people to learn from one another, to go back and improve about their educational practices in their various sectors or country. It also creates that platform where we form that social network with policy makers, practitioners, people who can sponsor research works.
What I'm most excited about is the opportunities to speak across disciplines and to speak across different areas, regions, and normal contexts that we work in, to then address the problems that we're grappling collectively for the future of education.
I think one of BERA's biggest contributions is really its ethics guidelines. I mean, it's the first place we go to when we're teaching research with students. It's the first place I go to when I'm preparing stuff. And I just think it's really important that it comes from an organisation that represents its members and has become the national benchmark of good practice.
For me, as an ECR, an early career researcher, I think one of the biggest contributions BERA makes is enabling other ECRs to connect to ECRs so that you don't feel so alone when you're doing research, or you kind of think that the problems that you face aren't things that other people share.
Today, I went to a session that was run for early career researchers, and just hearing their work, which I find to be really refreshing, and as an early career researcher myself, to just see what's new, what's interesting, what's creative, and what's coming up. There's going to be the future, hopefully.
the sense of belonging that's created for scholars across the globe. I've been so touched by people saying that they're confident to go up to strangers and just make conversation and share their knowledge with them. And it's rare for a conference of this size to have so many small conversations happening and where people can feel they're included.
BEAR has always been a whole, and it's given us a sense of coherence. So whatever the wider agendas are, BEAR has offered that sense of community and that sense of collegiality and solidarity for the research community.
Everybody is willing to listen to you. The little thing that you have to share, you can see when we go for the breakup session, you can see that people are willing to share their experiences. And then when you also contribute, you see that it is also adding up to knowledge. It's extremely informative. I'm a first-time BEAR conference attender, and I managed to present 2 of my papers. But I think, just hearing from other voices across the country and sharing my research, it was absolutely amazing. And I think having a joint conference with WERA with double the numbers that we've had this year has been really good. It's given it a kind of completely different feel, actually. I've really enjoyed it.
So I've chaired 3 presentations and attended quite a few so far and presented myself. The range of topics have been very interesting this year, but I've had to think really carefully about what I want to listen to.
Because of the diversity here, I've met a lot of contacts, old friends, new friends, so we love it.
The t-shirts did it for me. So there were no chances of getting lost.
I've never been at a conference where there's been so many delegates, and it's been organized in a way that well structured.
I think for me it's been meeting people that I haven't seen in a year and colleagues that I would have known for years really, so it's almost become like a yearly ritual.
It was just fascinating to hear the differences between 3 different countries tackling the same problems on teacher recruitment, retention and supply that brings to the surface different kinds of solutions.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to be called to BEAR. It's like, when I'm studying teacher training, I applied with abstract, taking my tutors, encouragement, and I did my best. I'm really happy, got the experience. Thank you.
Oh, and as I said, abstract submission is open already, and do join us in Brighton next year, which is always really nice to go back to Brighton, and we haven't been for quite some time. And we already have our keynote speakers engaged, so Alison Phipps and Diane Gerlich will be joining us next year as our keynotes, and Marlon will be doing the opening symposium from the findings that have emerged from his presidential seminars. And also the abstract submission is open for the ECR conference, which is held in Cloth Hall Court in Leeds in June each year. So please do disseminate that to your ECRs also. It's a really warm, friendly conference, that little bit smaller. And yeah, we will try to accommodate as many as possible.
Perfect, Mari.
Well, how do I follow that? Of course, the Publications Committee is busy as ever, and I just want to flag up a few key things. So first of all, what's really brilliant for us at BEAR is the impact factors for all 4 of our journals has gone up this year. And I particularly wanted to single out BJET, who's ranked now 6 out of 756 educational journals. That's a fantastic achievement, I think, and should be celebrated. All of our journals have had increased submissions this year. That in itself, of course, poses a bit of a problem in terms of finding wonderful reviewers. So I just want to flag this up. If you're a member of BEAR, or even if you're not, but you're interested, please think about reviewing some articles for our journals. If all of our members reviewed 1 article a year, we'd soon, speed things through the production. So please take up that offer. We've also had new editorial teams for Burge and Review of Education. They started in January, seem to be settling in very well, so thank you to them. We've also appointed a new editorial team for the Curriculum Journal, and our current editorial team will step down at the end of the year. In terms of ECRs, we are doing quite a lot, I think, within our journals to promote their experience and career trajectory. As Vivian said earlier, we're very interested in developing a pipeline of people who will eventually sit here on this stage leading our organisation. And it starts at the very beginning, doesn't it? So in terms of the publications portfolio, 2 of our journals have now got a sort of ECR reviewer scheme, which is brilliant. That's the Burge and the Review of Education. And BGES have an ECR board. So, we're hoping that these initiatives will develop and evolve. And when we have our annual meeting where all our journal editors come together with our publisher, we get an opportunity to share good practice and develop these things further. BJET also are in the process of awarding their BJET fellowship. I believe that will be decided fairly shortly. The Curriculum Journal has an interesting new feature this year, which is called the Curriculum in Professional Practice feature. And again, this is to try and think about broad membership, thinking about practitioners out there who are very interested in engaging with research. And this is a new feature which I think has been launched to great success. And again, we'll see how that goes. But we want to think about our broad membership and involving them at all stages. So moving on to the blog, I think we've already talked about the blog. As you can see, we now have nearly 300 blog posts published this last year. Just to give some context, we only published 160 articles in the blog last year. So it's a massive increase. I think the blog team has worked extremely hard. They've expanded their team to be able to actually process all these blog posts. But they're great quick reads. I enjoy reading them myself. Within that, we're thinking about how to extend the reach of the blog. So we have things like bites, which are curated series. We have special issues. And you'll see that 9 of these have been published in the last year. In the paper, there's the detail of what these different topics are. We did, I think Nick's already said this actually, we were worried that if we published more, it wouldn't necessarily translate to increase in view. But in fact, 25% increase in page views is very impressive. I think we now reach 203 countries across the globe, so massive readership. And it's the 10-year anniversary next year, so watch this space. I'm sure there'll be some really interesting events in the blog linked to that. It seems like a long time ago now, but we did publish the new ethical guidelines in April. I know myself, I use them in teaching. I think someone else said that in the video. And sort of go alongside that, we have some case studies on the web. If you have on the website, if you haven't looked at those, they're also very helpful for teaching, I think. And entice you that we have a book coming up that also links to this in terms of developing case studies that will accompany the ethical guidelines. We've also launched the first 2 of our new book series with Emerald. This is the BERA Guide's Critical Insights into Educational Research and Practice. They're meant to be kind of short, informative guides. I know the first 2 have editorial members in the audience. And if you haven't seen them, I think they're outside. Please sign up and buy one. They're really fantastic. So the titles are there. We've also published, and this is a first for us, we've published our own book this year, Curriculum in the Changing World. I think our publications manager would say the first and only book we're going to publish, because it was an awful lot of work coordinating 50 think pieces. But again, it's a very informative, interesting read, something you can pick up and put down, and it really charts the change over these 50 years. So it's linked obviously with our 50-year anniversary. We're also continuing to publish. Each of our awards has some kind of publication attached to it. This year we've spent down on the Brian Simon funds, so we've published the reports alongside that. We've also published the outcomes of the 2023 Small Grants Funding. That was focusing on education in a digital age. perspectives, policy and practice. I think we'd all agree these are reports that will be very interesting and very timely. And I guess my final thanks is a big thank you to all our teams of editors, editorial boards, reviewers, and of course authors as well. And I hope all of us in the room are involved in some way or other with our publications. But I particularly wanted to highlight Mark Priestley and Stavrula Philippou, who are standing down from the Curriculum Journal. They've, developed this journal a long way in the time they've been associated with it, and we really have a great amount of thanks to them. So that's one big thanks I want to say. But I have another big thanks to my colleague Sarah Hennessy, who is stepping down from BJET. The current team will continue, but Sarah's decided after 8 years, which is a long time, that she would like to step down. She arrived in 2016 at a time where I think it's fair to say there was some degree of turbulence. She steadied the ship. She got the team together. She developed a journal to be number 6 out of 700 and plus journals in the last 8 years. And I know she'll say it wasn't just her, it was a successful team, but she did an awful lot of work, which I would like to acknowledge in respect of that. But not only that, she served 2 terms on BERA Council, so sucker for punishment. After one, decided another was a good idea. She's also served on Publications Committee. She's very instrumental in getting me involved in BERA in the first place. And she was also very involved in not the version we were revising last time, but the previous incarnation of the ethical guidelines and the case studies that went alongside that. So, Sarah, I'm going to embarrass you now. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for all your commitment, and I have a little token of our appreciation if you'd like to come up.
You're very welcome. I guess we'll have a picture which will come up. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can I just say a huge thank you to everyone, and that it's actually been a genuine privilege to have been involved in those different roles in BERA that Ros has mentioned. I've enjoyed every minute of it. There have been some challenges, it's true to say, but overall I've worked with some fantastic people, particularly my colleagues on the BJET team, who've been so collegial and supportive. It's just been wonderful working with you. But everyone in BERA has been so supportive, and yeah, I'm full of admiration for it as an organisation. I've really enjoyed seeing how it's flourished and grown over the years. I've actually been a member of BERA for over 3 decades, I think. So yeah, been around a while, and yeah, it's become, well, it obviously takes a huge leadership role, and I'm pleased to see how it's flourished and become also more diverse and inclusive. So thank you everyone for all the great work you do, and thank you very much for this recognition.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm filling in for Jerry here, who cannot be with us today. So I'm going to race through some quick stats in terms of engagement. We have got record membership this year, over 3,000 members for the first time, so thank you all that are here. We've already heard reference to some of our funding awards and grants that we've done this year, but I think particularly pleased that we've been able to award over £125,000 of grant funding and continue to support the ECR network. We've also launched both the Teachers Network and the Neurodivergent Researchers Network this year, and we've continued to support SIGs and those networks with coffee hours and events. And just want to take this opportunity as well, as part of the thanks as well, to thank all those people who have served and continue to serve as our SIG conveners. Again, without your voluntary efforts, we wouldn't be the organisation we are, and we wouldn't have the kind of membership we have, and we wouldn't have the kind of vibrant conference that we saw a clip from earlier on. So thank you to all our SIG conveners there. In terms of other awards there, clearly the Curriculum Investigation Grant is a major part of our work, engaging with practitioners It was great to see an increase in applications for that award as well, and that was awarded by the British Curriculum Forum within BERA. I won't get onto the other award winners because we're going to come back to that after our coffee break shortly. But again, thanks to all those who judge and review our awards, particularly our College of Reviewers, which was an initiative set up under Dominic's presidency that has made the process even more rigorous and robust than it was. So they certainly bring a lot of insight to that. So I am now going to hand over to Diana for the financial update.
Well, mercifully for me and for you, I suspect, I only have 4 bullet points. I'm the new treasurer. I took over on September the 1st, and I see that my esteemed predecessor is sitting in the room, Sean. So I'm delighted to be able to tell him and you that the association is in very good order financially, and to present to you a very strong set of accounts and a full clean audit. We continue to have very strong reserves, and although we're trying to get to a position nearer to 1-to-1, we're struggling to do that, which is no bad thing, but we do understand that strategically we need to make sure those reserves are used for furthering the aims of BERA. Of course, we're in this position because of all the wonderful work you've heard my colleagues tell you about, and that's down to members. It's also very much down to the magnificent work of our professional staff. And finally, I'd just like to pay tribute to the members of the Finance and Operations Committee that support the work of financial monitoring and scrutiny and do an excellent job of governance. Thank you.
I'm going to be very brief on mine as well, because I'm conscious people could do with a break and a stretch of the legs and a cup of coffee before the awards. We've covered this earlier on, so I won't repeat it now. But I just wanted to highlight again some of the projects, and the details of this are in the written report about the ongoing work that we do. And I suppose particularly want to acknowledge there the fact that it has marked a significant year in that we have moved out of Ensley Gardens, where we were based for a number of years. We've said farewell to the rats that accompanied us in that building for quite some time, and we have moved into shared accommodation with the Political Studies Association, which is already proving very useful for us in terms of broadening our links with other societies as well and having that dialogue. And then finally, just in terms of some of the key highlights from the 50th anniversary, and we'll be doing more of this as we do the year. I hope members have enjoyed the highlighted sections of research intelligence that have looked at BERA over the decades and delved back into the archives. Certainly it was fascinating for me to delve back through the archives of research intelligence and find the issues that are still prevalent today that they were 50 years ago. We're about to publish the updated version of 40 at 40, imaginatively called 50 at 50, which will be a further 10 studies. Those of you present at the 40th anniversary may remember that publication, so that's something to look out for. And I suppose something in terms of the conference, heard a lot about the success of the conference, but what we did do this year, thanks to the strong financial position that we're in that Diana mentioned, is we were able to award 50 bursaries of £500 on top of our normal range of bursaries for people to attend this year. So that really was trying to put resources back into the community and then updating the branding and the logo. So that is it for the year in review. The election results are in the papers for people's information in terms of on the website. And again, thank you to all those candidates that put themselves forward for all the different roles that we have and need filling across the association. One of the things we have to do each year is fill out a return for the Charity Commission, and part of that is dictating how many volunteers we have as a charity. And to be honest, it's upwards of 150 each year if you count people who edit our journals, sit on our committees, college reviewers. If we included people who review for our journals, it would be even higher than that. But it's still a significant amount of people that we acknowledge in that report, and that's always, it's always a good reminder of just where the efforts of BERA come from in doing that.
Thanks, Nick. So, point 8 and 9, minutes and matters arising from last year's AGM. They were part of the papers. Any comments or notes to make from anybody in the room on those? Otherwise, we can move on. Okay, we'll move on to any other business. None? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending the AGM. We can now take a short break before the awards ceremony. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Perfect.